This video is for business leaders who know there's nothing better than direct real-world experience to improve everything from engineering to empirical enlightenment, also known as creativity earned through experience. So watch to the end of this video for bonus material on earning your own empirical enlightenment and a recommended video on innovation through observation. I think this actually is why people pretend that they're perfectionists, because they can't fail at anything they've never tried or experienced. I really think people who avoid doing any real world work outside of just their theories and their what's already been proven to them are doing so because they, as I said, they can't fail at anything they've never tried or experienced. But more than that, they're essentially hiding behind their perfection or perfectionist facade. Everything I do is perfect. That's why I don't accomplish anything, is because I need it to be perfect first, which of course exposes you to the chance of failure, because in the real world, things work the way they work, not the way we hope they will. And sometimes they align, but there's so much value to be gained. It's just a shame that people are so terrified of what they mistakenly think of as failure or mistakes. Unfortunately, corporate America is far too in that same headspace, and that's one of the reasons most companies are what I would call dino corps. That is, they are intransigent and slow and likely to become extinct in a short relative period of time. So while it's sensible to minimize your chances or the chances of failure, empirical enlightenment can only be created from doing, just like any valid scientific experiment. Everything is a theory until you actually test it in the real world, and the value you gain from that is incalculable, whether it succeeds or fails. Obviously, you want it to succeed, but that failure is just as instructive and probably more so. So this is the reason that Google has 20% time to facilitate the kind of creative insight that only comes from doing things and seeing what happens. If you don't know what 20% time, that's 20% of the time, at least for certain positions in Google, employees are free to work on any project that they want. And Gmail and many things that are now major Google products actually came out of that 20% time. It's like, go do something that has nothing to do with your typical assigned work that you're interested in doing and has had no approval. 20% of their time, a day a week, is allocated to that purpose. And the results speak for themselves. So this is the same way every form of life on Earth evolved to its current state with zero need for intelligent design. And yet the designs in nature are usually far superior to creative designs of those of us who strive to design using our intelligence. Isn't that interesting? That automatic design through error, failure, and reiteration or iteration for a long enough period of time is better than the best that humans can come up with in almost all cases. So when 6-year-olds spontaneously found a funner way to play a game I designed, I immediately adopted it. I wanted them, basically what it came down to is jumping over something is way funner than stepping over it or around it. The whole point was they were like plastic surfaces on the ground, and if the kids stepped on them, they could slip. But if they stepped around them or over them, they wouldn't slip. And one of them jumped over. It's like, okay, we're changing the game. Jump over that. That's much funner. So when you recognize it, you got to do it. So the only way this could happen, the only way I could have learned that is by taking it and risking the game failing. I do have games and activities that fail, products that fail, but you have to expose them to the real world to get these opportunities for this sort of empirical enlightenment that sometimes only comes unexpectedly and not necessarily from yourself, but radically improves a solution or an idea or your creativity as a result of that. So the same is true for making and testing physical prototypes or A/B testing your marketing content. You don't know what it's going to do until you bring it into the real world and make that test empirical. So the objective universe can only give you empirical results if you bounce your ideas off of objective reality to see what happens. It's another way to put it. And you only gain creative insight and inspiration from that if your mindset is such that not only that you see the results, whether they're good or bad, is less relevant, but also, or in addition to the good or bad, that is, whether you get the target result or not, as something that may be a creative solution to somewhere else or to some other problem or another opportunity. Think Velcro, a nuisance for hikers turned into a fastener for special forces, or those of all ages who can't tie their own shoes. So whether purposeful or not, you won't know what works until you try it. If you go in with the mindset of being prepared to fail, but go in with an experimental mindset, kind of like, I think that there's much more. I'll give you an example. Think that there's much more amylite under this ugly rock, but I'm prepared to be wrong. So just in case you're wondering, amylite is kind of like the Canadian gemstone. I'm Canadian. I made some souvenirs from the last time I went to Canada, and I came back here and I made jewelry for some friends of mine as a souvenir. And I thought it would be cool to have the only Canadian gemstone. So amylite is basically an opal-like organic gemstone found primarily along the eastern slopes of the Rocky Mountains of North America. So many times it's sort of considered the Canadian gemstone. That little tidbit and that definition comes from Wikipedia, by the way. So essentially that's the case, but I figured, okay, I'm going to take this stuff, and it had a little bit of amylite on one side and then a covered chunk in the middle, which could be nothing but garbage, and then some on the other side. And I thought, I think the way that the layers look, I think if I can find a way to take off the surface, I might find that the whole piece is amylite. I was right. I figured it out. I used a soft, abrasive, sort of rubber abrasive wheel, and I ground off that extra stone, and it was a piece about this big, and it was cheap because there was no way to know what was underneath. So sometimes it just works out, but you only know that when you do the real world experience stuff. But multiple attempts for me to make a special camera support for my home studio failed miserably. But what happened is it led me to stumble upon a far simpler and superior solution I hadn't and probably wouldn't have thought of were it not for working on it in the real world. It wound up being using some of the structure I have to hold some lights and literally one telescopic pole, and just by lengthening or shortening it, changing the angle, I could put a camera somewhere that would otherwise be impossible, get impossible camera angles effectively in any part of the three-dimensional space that is my home studio. So real-world experience and experimentation often leads to creative solutions you won't find any other way, mostly because those ones are oftentimes ones you aren't looking for. Obviously, if you're looking for something, you have a chance of finding it, but you may find something completely unexpected, like the examples I've just given. So add to that yesterday's strategy that I talked about, which was to create consistently, and you have two solid strategies for driving your own or your company's creativity engine. So thank you for watching this far. We've reached the bonus material, and the bonus material is this: bring toys to work. And I am not joking when I say this. Please forgive me, researcher, if I didn't say your name wrong. It's Kwa Chen of the Tsai City University of Macau did a meta-analysis of creative training in adults, and his conclusion was, and I quote, "The results confirm the findings of previous meta-analysis indicating creativity training is effective for adults." That may not be that sexy, but it's saying the creativity we normally train in and encourage in kids, which is normally lost in most adults since we don't use it for anything, and don't actually require creativity for many of our jobs, is likewise lost or impaired. So research in neuroplasticity, which is essentially brain rewiring, that's what I studied in my undergrad. My bachelor's degree was working, or my instructors, most of them were world renowned in neuroplasticity, or at least two of them, the heads of the neuroscience department where I went to university. And it shows that enriched environments produce smarter rats with more diverse and connected brains. Now, why would you care? Because this kind of research, and people talk about it all the time now, your brain is rewired by anything essentially that you do. So if you do things that challenge you, do things that are creative, it is more likely to build. It's like building a muscle. You use it or lose it. So the same is true for humans, but I would caution that if you bring toys to work, or you literally make toys part of your work environment, which I think is a good idea and what I'm suggesting here, I would caution you that those toys should be creative. That is, openly creative, rather than just games like ping pong or air hockey or pool. Those aren't going to help you move you in a creative path, because you just have a simple goal. You do the same thing. Does it build your brain? Yes, but probably not your creativity, because it's too fixed in the rules. You're going down a specific narrow path of activity versus something more open-minded or more creatively minded. So I recommend plasticine, or PCL. Now, PCL is, right here, this plastic. All it is it's a heat-sensitive plastic that you can melt at about 60 Celsius. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, but you can melt it in hot-ish warm water that's just a little too hot to put your hand in. You can melt it and mold it into any shape you want. And it has the structural strength of nylon. I've used it in real products or real prototypes, as well as just for experimentation. You could certainly sculpture it. Or at the very least, if you're not using plasticine or PCL, which is polycaprolactone, you could use something, some other far more creative building blocks than Lego, or building toys than Lego. Lego, but your toy is pretty lame these days. There are far more creative and interesting building sets out there that give you way more directions than left and right, up and down. So that's also when your brain hits a wall, and this is in terms of what value these toys actually have in a real workplace, in a real creative workplace, which is most, whether you acknowledge it or not, that some playtime might just be better for than nap time for breaking through said wall. I know some big companies have like napping pods. You have this problem, you're working on it, you just, it's time to take a break and get away from it. You could go have a coffee and a block of sugar that's, some sweet treat. You could do that, and that would give you willpower, but that's not necessarily going to give you insight. If instead you literally just got away, took some downtime, mental downtime or away time from what you're doing to play with toys like the ones I talked about or many others, it might just be the thing that tips you over the edge. I can tell you from my extensive experience, when I run into technical problems, time away after pushing hard is what oftentimes breaks the deadlock and helps me find the next solution, or the solution I'm looking for. So my recommended video for today is find solutions through observation. So this is in essence very similar to what I talked about today, but it's giving some specific real world examples that came up that I certainly would not have thought of had they not actually happened to me directly. And neither of them were intended, and neither of them were something where I was specifically looking to do a creative exercise. So if you love a creative, please share this video with them. This has been Crush It Club 247, Experience Empirical Enlightenment, also known as creativity earned through experience. My name is Tim B. Green. Bye for now.